Yolanda Briggs still had bleach under her fingernails when she found him. A man crumpled in the drainage ditch off Route 9, one leg twisted wrong, blood soaking into the gravel beside his head. She had $4 in her coat pocket and an 8-year-old waiting at Mrs. Alvarado's apartment 2 floors up from her own. No car, no husband to call. The smart thing was to keep walking and let someone else find him. But if she left a dying man in a ditch to make it home 5 minutes faster, what kind of person would she be lying next to Desmond that night, pretending she still believed in anything? The sky over Millbrook, Ohio had gone the color of a bruise, purple sliding into gray, by the time Yolanda turned off Route 9 onto the gravel shoulder that cut behind the old grain elevator. She'd worked the closing shift at Dunmore Community College, 12 years of stripping wax off hallway floors and emptying trash cans full of other people's regret. And that morning her supervisor had handed her a clipboard and asked her to sign off on a fire safety inspection she never performed. Just initial it, Yolanda. Nobody checks. We do it every quarter. She had looked at the man's face, at the casual certainty in it, and said no. By noon, she didn't have a job anymore. She walked the long way home because the long way was free, and because it gave her 20 extra minutes to figure out how she was going to tell Desmond that rice and butter was dinner again. Her husband, Marcus. No, not Marcus. That name had never belonged to anyone she loved. She wouldn't waste it here. Her husband's name had been Theodore, and he had been dead 3 years, crushed under a warehouse pallet jack that a safety inspector somewhere had also signed off on without looking too closely. She thought about that a lot. She thought about it walking home from a job she'd lost for refusing to be that inspector. Desmond had asked her a question 2 nights ago, while she was scrubbing dishes that didn't need scrubbing twice, just to have something to do with her hands. "Mama, how do you know when you're doing the right thing?" She'd told him you just know, in your gut, and hated herself a little for the lie, because she didn't know anymore. Doing right had cost her a paycheck that morning. Doing right had put Theodore under a pallet jack. She was 39 years old and still waiting for the universe to explain the math to her. That was when she heard the phone. It rang from somewhere down in the weeds along the ditch, a thin electronic cry swallowed almost immediately by the wind, then rising again, insistent. Yolanda stopped walking. Route 9 was empty in both directions. No headlights, no porch lights, nothing but dead cornfields stretching toward the tree line. She almost kept going. God help her, she almost did. Then the phone rang a 3rd time, and something in her, some old stubborn thing Theodore used to call her hardest soft heart in Ohio, turned her feet toward the ditch instead of away from it. He was young, maybe 30, dressed in clothes too fine for a roadside, a torn dress shirt, 1 shoe missing, his dark hair matted with blood at the temple. His breathing came shallow and wet. Yolanda scrambled down into the mud without a second thought for her 1 good pair of work pants, pressed 2 fingers to his throat, found a pulse that flickered like a bad connection. "Hey," she said, voice cracking on the single syllable. "Hey, can you hear me?" Nothing. His phone lay glowing in the grass, screen locked, a name flashing across the top of a wall of missed calls. Dad, Dad, Dad. Whoever the man's father was, he'd called 11 times in the last 40 minutes. Yolanda dialed 911 on her own cracked phone, the one with 3 bars of prepaid minutes left on it, and gave the dispatcher her location in a voice that didn't sound like hers. 25 minutes, the woman on the line told her, apologetic. Rural roads. Yolanda pressed her palm to the wound at his temple and did the only math that mattered. 25 minutes was a long time for a person to keep bleeding, and she was the only clock in the world that could slow it down. She thought about walking away. She let herself think it, honestly, the way you let yourself look at a cliff edge before you step back from it. Nobody would ever know she'd been here. A black woman found alone with an unconscious white man on an empty road at dusk. She knew exactly how that story got told by people who'd already decided who the criminal was before they heard a single fact. She thought about Mrs. Alvarado watching Desmond, who could only stay until 7, and it was already 10 past 6. Then she thought about Desmond's question. How do you know when you're doing the right thing? Damn it, she muttered, and pressed harder against the wound, and stayed. At the hospital, St. Agnes, the only one for 40 miles. The emergency room swallowed him behind double doors, and Yolanda stood in the waiting room with blood drying stiff on her sleeve and no way home but her own 2 feet. She called Mrs. Alvarado, begged another hour, listened to Desmond's small voice in the background asking when Mama was coming. A nurse found her an hour later with a clipboard and an apologetic face. The man had no ID, no insurance, no emergency contact that would answer. Surgery was needed. Someone had to sign as guarantor. I don't even know his name, Yolanda said. Ma'am, without a guarantor, we can stabilize him. But nothing further. Is there anyone? She thought of the phone ringing Dad over and over in an empty ditch. Some father out there was tearing the world apart looking for this man, and she had no way to reach him. She looked at the $4 folded in her coat pocket, at the line on the clipboard asking her to promise money she did not have, and she picked up the pen anyway. Her hand shook so badly the signature came out crooked. Yolanda Marie Briggs, guarantor for a stranger. What have I done, she thought, and handed the clipboard back. 3 days passed and no one came for him. Yolanda kept returning to St. Agnes every morning before her new part-time shift at the diner on Route 9, Hank Delgado's place, the only man in town who'd hire a woman with her name in the local paper's police blotter, even wrongly, even for something as small as an anonymous 911 call. She'd find the same man in the same bed, bandages wrapped around his skull, an arm in a cast, eyes closed to a world that hadn't claimed him yet. On the 3rd morning, a hospital administrator, a tired woman named Miss Feldman with reading glasses on a chain, cornered her in the hallway. The patient was stable now, the surgery had gone well, but without insurance or confirmed next of kin, St. Agnes could not justify keeping him in acute care. County facility 3 to 4 weeks wait. Or, Ms. Feldman let the sentence hang the way people do when they already know what they're really asking. Yolanda could take him home. She thought about her apartment. 500 square feet, 1 bedroom that belonged to Desmond, a pull-out couch that had been Theodore's side of the world once. She thought about everything that could go wrong bringing a strange, unconscious man into her son's small life. Then she thought about Desmond's question again, the one she still hadn't answered honestly. I'll take him, she heard herself say. Mrs. Alvarado nearly fainted when Yolanda carried the man through her front door with the help of a hospital orderly. Desmond, though, met the whole event with the unfiltered wonder of an 8-year-old who hadn't yet learned to be afraid of strangers. Mama, who is he? I found him hurt by the road a few days ago. Nobody's come to help him yet, so we're going to... Is he gonna die? No, baby. He's gonna get better. We're gonna help him. Desmond studied the sleeping man's face with an intensity that reminded Yolanda painfully of Theodore, who used to look at broken engines the same way, like if he stared long enough the truth would surface on its own. He looks sad, Desmond said finally. Even sleeping, he looks sad. Yolanda didn't have an answer for that either. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of exhaustion. Yolanda picked up every shift Hank would give her, plus weekend cleaning jobs she found through word of mouth, cash under the table, whatever kept the lights on. She gave the man the pull-out couch and slept on the floor of Desmond's room, listening through the wall for sounds of trouble. The stranger drifted in and out, murmuring things that made no sense, staring at the ceiling with eyes that saw nothing at all. The doctors had warned her about memory loss after trauma like this. Living with it in her own front room was a different thing entirely than hearing it explained in a clean hallway. On the 5th evening, while Yolanda stood at the stove reheating soup, She heard his voice for the first time. Rough, thin, but present. "Where am I?" She turned to find him sitting up, gripping the couch cushion like it might vanish, his eyes wide with the particular fear of someone waking into a life they don't recognize. "It's okay," she said, keeping her voice level the way she used to for Desmond during thunderstorms. "You're safe. My name's Yolanda. I found you off Route 9 about a week back. You were hurt bad." His gaze swept the apartment, the peeling paint above the window, the second-hand furniture, a row of Desmond's crayon drawings taped to the fridge. Something in his expression shifted from fear to confusion to a kind of quiet shame. I can't remember how I got there," his voice cracked. "I can't remember anything." Desmond appeared in the doorway in his pajamas, eyes bright. "You're awake! Mama said you would." He crossed the room and stopped short, suddenly shy. "I'm Desmond. I'm 8. What's your name?" The man opened his mouth, closed it. His face crumpled and tears slid down before he could stop them. "I don't know," he whispered. "I don't know my own name." Desmond looked to his mother, then climbed onto the couch without hesitation and wrapped both small arms around the stranger's shoulders. "It's okay," he said, repeating words he'd heard his mother say 100 times. "You're safe here. We're gonna help you get better." Something broke open behind the man's eyes, a wall coming down, and he hugged the boy back, shoulders shaking. And Yolanda stood in her own kitchen watching her son do effortlessly what she herself had been too afraid to try, closing the distance between stranger and family with nothing but plain, unconditional kindness. Over the following week, fragments surfaced. He remembered the taste of black coffee, the smell of cedar, the sound of a particular woman's laugh he couldn't place a face to. He remembered a man's voice, cold and precise, telling him his choices weren't really his to make. But his name stayed locked somewhere he couldn't reach. Until one evening, while Yolanda washed dishes, Desmond sat beside him on the couch, showing off a shoebox of Pinewood Derby cars, and asked with the blunt honesty only a child can manage, "Do you got a mom and dad? Is that why nobody came for you?" The man's hand froze over a toy car. Something flickered behind his eyes, sharp and sudden. "I have a father," he said slowly, testing each word. "He's looking for me. I can feel it. But I don't want him to find me." "Why not?" "Because he wants me to do something I don't want to do. He wants me to marry someone I don't love." The memories came all at once after that, a wave he couldn't hold back. His name was Weston Hargrove. His father was Gideon Hargrove, the real estate and logistics billionaire whose face turned up on business magazine covers and cable news alike. Weston had been engaged, against every private wish he had, to Imogen Delacroix, daughter of his father's largest merger partner, a match built on boardroom math, not affection. Imogen's family fixer, a cold, immaculate man named Roderick Vance, had made it clear the wedding would happen whether Weston wanted it to or not. The night he fled his own engagement dinner, Weston's car had been forced off Route 9 by a black SUV that felt, even in memory, far too deliberate to be an accident. When he finished, the apartment felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in to hold the weight of it. "Your father's Gideon Hargrove," Yolanda repeated, flat. "The one offering $500,000 for information on his missing son." Weston flinched. "I didn't know about the reward. But yes, that's him." Yolanda walked to the window and stared out at the parking lot below, at her own reflections ghosted over the streetlight. $500,000. More than she'd earn in the rest of her working life scrubbing floors and pouring coffee. Enough to bury every bill, to send Desmond somewhere better than the Millbrook public schools, to never again lie awake doing math that never balanced. One phone call. "You thinking about turning me in?" Weston asked quietly. "I wouldn't blame you. I'm thinking about my son," she said, turning back. "About what happens to him if I get tangled up in whatever you're running from. Then let me leave. Tonight. You'll never have to think about me again. And go where? You can barely stand on your own. No ID, no money, and somebody already tried to kill you once." She shook her head. I didn't pull you out of that ditch to watch you climb back in. They stood there, two people from opposite ends of the same country, bound by nothing but chance and stubbornness. I'll call my father, Weston said finally. Not because I want to go back, because I won't let you pay for saving me. Just give me a few days. Let me figure out what to say to him. Yolanda nodded slowly. A few more days. She should have known that was going to cost her everything. The story broke on a Tuesday. Yolanda was walking Desmond to school when she noticed the looks. Not the usual glances that came with being one of a handful of black families on her block, but something sharper. By noon, her phone buzzed with texts from numbers she didn't recognize. By evening, her face was on the local news, under a headline designed to imply everything while stating nothing. Missing Hargrove hire found in cleaning woman's apartment. Questions remain. Reporters camped outside her building. Neighbors stopped meeting her eyes. Hank Delgado, apologetic but firm, told her the diner couldn't handle the attention and let her go. And then there was Desmond, coming home from school with red-rimmed eyes and a note from his teacher, refusing to repeat what the other kids had said about his mother. They said you did something bad, he finally admitted, voice barely a whisper. They said you kept that man to get money. Yolanda knelt and held her son's shoulders. Look at me. Did I do something wrong? No. Then what do those kids know that you don't? Nothing. His chin trembled, but he didn't cry. They don't know anything. That's right. People are going to say ugly things about me. Some of it's going to be lies. But you know the truth, and as long as you do, nothing else matters. That night, after Desmond finally slept, 3 men came for her in the stairwell outside her apartment. They didn't announce themselves. They dragged her into the alley behind the building and left her on the ground with a split lip and 2 cracked ribs. And before they walked away, one of them crouched down close enough that she could smell his cologne. Stay away from the Hargroves. Stay away from Weston. Next time it won't just be you. That boy of yours is real easy to find. She lay in that alley a long time, staring at the strip of sky between 2 buildings, thinking about Desmond asleep 2 floors above her, and about how close she'd come to getting him killed for a stranger who had his own family, his own world, his own troubles that had nothing to do with hers. When she finally made it back inside, Desmond was standing in the living room, waiting, and he burst into tears the moment he saw her face. Mama. You promised you wouldn't leave me. She sank to her knees and held him, feeling his whole small body shake against her. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. I promise. But even saying it, she already knew what she was going to do. She blocked Weston's number the next morning, ignored the reporters, told Desmond they were going to forget the man on the couch and go back to normal. For 3 days it almost worked. The cameras drifted to other stories. Then the silence started to weigh on her in a way she hadn't expected. She had spent her whole life telling her son that doing right mattered even when it cost you something, and now she was teaching him, without meaning to, that fear was stronger than principle. Desmond saw straight through it, the way children always do. Mama, he said one evening, standing in the kitchen doorway with an expression too old for 8 years, you always tell me to do the right thing even when it's hard. Why aren't you doing it now? The question landed like a fist. She opened her mouth for some adult excuse and found nothing there. Her son was right. If she quit now, she would spend the rest of her life looking at him and seeing her own cowardice reflected back. She was done running. The knock came at midnight 3 nights later, soft but insistent. Weston stood in the hallway, pale under the flickering light, wearing a plain coat over hospital scrubs, nothing like the tailored suits from his family's press photos. In his hands, he clutched a manila envelope. I know you blocked me, he said before she could speak. I know you want nothing to do with any of this, but you need to see what's in here. She let him in, glancing back to make sure Desmond's door was still closed. Weston spread photographs and phone records across her kitchen table, hands trembling as he arranged them. After I went back to my father's, I hired an investigator outside the family's network. Someone Vance couldn't buy. It took him 3 days to find what the police never bothered to look for. He tapped a photograph of a black SUV, its plate circled in red. This car followed me from the engagement dinner. It's registered to a shell company controlled by the Delacroix family, the same company that flew 3 men into Millbrook 2 days before you were attacked. Yolanda stared at the evidence, mind racing to connect it. Imogen's family did this? Roderick Vance did this. On their behalf. My father's merger with the Delacroix Group is worth billions, and it all hinged on me walking down that aisle. When I tried to run, Vance decided to bring me back by force. When you got in the way, he tried to remove you. Does your father know? Weston's face flickered with something like grief. I want to believe he doesn't. But the merger's still moving forward, and he hasn't asked a single question about what actually happened that night. He pushed the envelope toward her. This is everything you need to clear your name. Take it to the press, the police, wherever you want. I'm done letting people pay for my family's sins. Why give it to me? You could go public yourself. You've got the money, the connections. Because you saved my life when no one else would have. You let your son hug me when I couldn't remember my own name. His eyes shone, but he didn't cry. I spent my whole life around people who'd sacrifice anything for money and power. I never once saw what it looked like when somebody sacrificed for nothing but the belief that it was right. You showed me that. Yolanda picked up the envelope. It felt heavier than paper and photographs had any right to. I don't need you fighting my battles, she said quietly. But I could use somebody standing next to me for this one. The press conference happened 3 days later. In the gymnasium of the Millbrook Boys and Girls Club, a modest cinder block building that smelled like floor polish and old basketballs. A place that looked like the world Yolanda actually lived in, not the one Weston came from. Reporters packed in shoulder to shoulder. Yolanda stood at a folding table with a microphone that squealed every few seconds, the bruise on her jaw still yellow-green, her ribs aching every time she drew a full breath, but her voice held steady. My name is Yolanda Briggs. 3 weeks ago, I found a man dying by the side of Route 9. I called an ambulance. I stayed with him at the hospital. When nobody came to claim him, I brought him into my home so he wouldn't be alone. I didn't know he was Weston Hargrove. I didn't know his father was a billionaire. I knew he was hurt and needed help, and that was enough for me. She looked out at the room, braced for hostility, found mostly stunned quiet instead. Since then, I've been called a kidnapper, a con artist, and worse things I won't say in front of my son. I lost 2 jobs. I got jumped in my own stairwell by men who told me to keep quiet or watch my boy get hurt. A murmur ran through the crowd. I'm not here for sympathy, and I'm not here for money. I'm here because the truth is the one thing nobody's managed to take from me yet. I helped a dying man because that's what you do. I'd do it again tomorrow knowing everything it would cost me, because that's the mother I want my son to have. She stepped back, and Weston took her place. No tailored suit, no polish, just a young man who looked tired and certain in equal measure. Yolanda Briggs is telling the truth, he said, voice carrying to the back wall. She saved my life at real cost to herself, and powerful people tried to destroy her for it. I have evidence that Roderick Vance, acting for the Delacroix family, orchestrated the crash that nearly killed me, and later sent men to assault Ms. Briggs and threaten her son. This evidence has gone to the district attorney and to several newsrooms. Anyone is welcome to verify it. He turned toward Yolanda, and something passed between them that no camera could capture. I grew up believing money meant safety. I was wrong. The safest I have ever felt in my life was on a pull-out couch in a 500-square-foot apartment, with an 8-year-old boy hugging me when I couldn't remember my own name. Ms. Briggs taught me that integrity isn't something you can buy. You can only live it. The fallout came fast, and none of it landed on Yolanda. Roderick Vance was arrested 4 days later on conspiracy and assault charges the evidence made impossible to bury. The Hargrove-Delacroix merger collapsed within the week. Hargrove's stock dropped 9% in a single trading session. And for the first time in a long while, Gideon Hargrove found himself facing a problem money couldn't solve for him. He came to Yolanda's apartment on a Thursday evening, alone, no security, no lawyers. Just a tired man in an expensive coat standing in a hallway that smelled like fried onions and mildew. She almost didn't recognize him from his television face, all sharp edges and cold command. This man looked smaller, like someone who'd been carrying something heavy for far too long. "Ms. Briggs, may I come in?" She considered saying no. Had every reason to. Instead, she thought of her own reflection the night she'd signed those hospital papers with a shaking hand and stepped aside. Gideon sat on the same couch his son had slept on for 2 weeks, looking around at the crayon drawings on the fridge, the second-hand furniture, the whole small, honest shape of her life. "I came to offer you compensation," he said finally. "Enough that you and your son never have to worry again. It's the least I can do." Yolanda leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "And what exactly would that be paying me for? For saving my son? For being the kind of person I apparently failed to raise him around?" "I didn't save him for money, Mr. Hargrove, and I'm not interested in a check for doing what any decent person would have done." His jaw tightened. "Then what do you want?" She thought about it. Really thought, the way she hadn't let herself in 3 weeks of chaos. "I want my son to grow up somewhere doing right doesn't get you beat in a stairwell. I want him to believe kindness still counts for something, even against people with your kind of power." She held his gaze. "You want to make this right? Don't write me a check to make yourself feel better. Set up something real. A scholarship fund, open to any kid in this town who needs it, not just mine. Put your name on something that helps people who'll never make your headlines. That's worth more to me than a number with my name on it." The silence stretched, full of things neither of them said out loud. Then Gideon nodded slowly, like a man accepting a verdict he hadn't expected but couldn't argue with. "How do you raise a child to be good?" he asked quietly, "in a world that rewards everything else?" Yolanda thought of Desmond, of the question that had started this whole ordeal. "You don't teach it with words, Mr. Hargrove. You teach it by living it. Every day, every choice. They're watching, and they become what they see." He extended his hand. She shook it, and something shifted in the space between them. Not friendship, not forgiveness exactly, but the start of something like understanding. He left without another word. A week later, an envelope came in the mail. Not a check made out to Yolanda Briggs, but a letter confirming the establishment of the Theodore Briggs Memorial Scholarship, funded by the Hargrove Family Foundation, open to any student in the Millbrook School District. Yolanda read it twice at her kitchen table, then folded it carefully and set it on the fridge next to Desmond's drawings. She found Desmond in the doorway of his room that night, wearing pajamas printed with cartoon rockets, eyes full of questions. "Mama, was that Weston's dad who came by?" "Yeah, baby, it was." "Is he a bad man?" She knelt in front of her son the way she always did when something needed saying properly. "I think he's a man who forgot how to be good for a long while. Maybe he's starting to remember." Desmond considered this with the seriousness only a child can manage. "Like how you remembered, when you helped that man, even though it was scary." Yolanda pulled him into a hug, breathing in soap and boy and the particular smell of childhood that never lasted as long as you wanted it to. "Yeah," she said softly, "just like that." They walked together to the window and watched the sun go down over Millbrook, orange bleeding into the gray rooftops, and Desmond slipped his small hand into hers. "Mama, are we still poor?" She smiled, tired all the way to her bones and somehow lighter than she'd been in years. "Yeah, baby, we're still poor, but we're good people. right? Right, that's the richest thing I've got to give you. Somewhere out there, Weston Hargrove was learning how to be a person nobody had scripted for him. Gideon Hargrove was learning, slowly, what it meant to be a father worth admiring instead of fearing. Roderick Vance was facing a future he'd never once imagined for himself. But in a small apartment above a laundromat on the edge of Millbrook, Ohio, with peeling paint and a fridge covered in crayon suns, a different kind of wealth filled the room. The kind that never shows up on anyone's balance sheet, passed quietly from a mother to her son in the hardest, most ordinary choices a person can make. If you stayed with this one all the way to the end, thank you. Yolanda Briggs never got the reward money, and she never once seemed to regret it. What she got instead was a boy who'll grow up knowing exactly who his mother is, and that turns out to be worth more than anyone with $1 billion ever managed to buy. If this story reminded you that doing right is never really wasted, hold on to that. And if you want more stories about ordinary people who choose, again and again, to be extraordinary, we'll see you in the next one.